So, The Portrait of a Lady is a story about American expatriates in Britain and Europe. A story about marriage, dreams, desires, satisfaction, and dissatisfaction in the face of life. The story follows Isabel Archer, who is orphaned and lives at her uncle's estate of Gardencourt with the English Touchets. She has a good relationship with the entire family and takes on an offer to travel with Mrs. Touchet to her estate in Florence. At the beginning of the story, both Mr. Touchet, the family patriarch, and Ralph, her cousin, are sick, which become important plot points later on. Isabel is the youngest of three sisters, all with their own talents, although she is shown to be the most intelligent and affable of the three, and is shown to be full of great dreams to travel and to live out her life in her full capacity. Isabel, while at the estate of Lockley, befriends Lord Warburton, who takes an immediate interest in her. While he believes that she reciprocates it, it is made apparent afterwards that this is not the case, and that she, despite his high birth and immense wealth compared to her own destitute, refuses him. Not only refuses him once, but after many naggings, and even the offer of an alternative option to send a letter, rejects him. He is left in disbelief that he would be so rejected and eventually attempts to marry the daughter of Mr. Osmond, who we meet later on as an attempt to get closer to her. During this period, at Isabel's side is the constant force of Henrietta Stackpole, who embodies the American spirit. She is adventurous, confident, and independent, fighting for better positions in journalism. She acts as a guide to Isabel and also a contrast by the socially mobile Americans who are seen as these confident new players compared to the established settlers of the English aristocracy and the continental Europeans who are too comforted in their ways of life. Isabel is then visited during her residence by Mr. Caspar Goodwin from America. He is again, like Mrs. Stackpole, a representation of new American masculinity, but also naivety. He attempts to court Isabel as well, but is too swiftly rejected. He attempts to impose a condition on Isabel, which is accepted that he will write to her again in 2 years to see if she changes his mind. Following two rejections to the dismay of many of the family, who see the failure to accept two good offers of wealthy, comfortable men, Isabel finds out about Madame Merle. As Mr. Touchet is on his deathbed, she comes to visit and plays piano in a far quiet room so as not to disturb. Isabel and Madame Merle become well acquainted instantly, with Isabel being attracted to Merle's high skill set and all attributes and her charisma. And there's this passage where Isabel walks in and she goes to this room, and it's sort of the seductive aura, the seductive sort of nature that um, where she meets Madame Merle, and it's almost this sort of relationship kind of love experience more than just uh, you know Isabel meeting this sort of strange foreign woman. Meanwhile, Ralph and the moribund Mr. Toucher on his deathbed, where Ralph suggests to his father that the destitute Isabel should be included into his will despite her status as a niece. He believes that the initial £7,000 is not enough to sustain her dreams of high living, and so convinces his father to change it without mentioning his interference. He states that he loves Isabel deeply, and although he refuses to pursue her romantically, he wants to leave it with her. After Mr. Toucher's death, Isabel was made rich with £70,000, half of the total inheritance, which would be likely millions today. She travels to the continent to Florence with Madame Merle and Mrs. Touchet, where she meets Mr. Osmond. Mr. Osmond is also an American who resides in Italy with a daughter, Nancy, from a previous marriage. He is first shown to be not very charismatic, a little bit stuck up, sort of like a less charismatic Mr. Rochester. Although Madame Merle tries really hard to set the two up. Eventually, though, a visit to Rome, however, where Isabel runs into Lord Warburton and Gilbert Osmond, Isabel succumbs to Osmond's intellectualism and his independence that she covets and decides to marry him, although she is unwittingly becoming a pawn to a larger scheme stretched in a web by Madame Merle. There is concern voiced by almost everyone in Isabel's circle of family and friends, particularly by the Touchets and Mrs. Stackpole, who see Osmond as this very fake, phony figure. There's a subsequent time skip, which is a bit disorienting initially when you read it. When we fast forward to Isabel, now Mrs. Osmond, and her domestic life with Mr. Osmond. Whereas previously the portrait of Isabel had been a nebulous one defined by opportunity in the men that gave her offers and were denied, after a marriage, she becomes this worryingly physical and real thing. She's defined by her relationship to Mr. Osmond. She becomes this gaunt, apathetic, and indifferent character, far from the headstrong and idealistic Isabel of before. She was always seen wearing black, and she spends most of her time idling away or in the company of Mr. Osmond, holding appearances for her guests. The relationship with Mr. Osmond is clearly shown to be strained due to a failure of the two to see and see each other's minds and to understand one another. While Mr. Osmond boasts of his great relationship with her, she can only agree and voice her frustrations and introspection. Her only real friend afterwards becomes Pansy, who she confides in as if she were her own daughter, although a scheme arises by Mr. Osmond to marry her into higher standing. Pansy and Edward Rosier, a poorer English gentleman, fall in love with one another, although all of Rosier's actions are halted by Osmond, who sees him as below his standard desired for a partner for Pansy. He instead encourages notions from Lord Warburton to marry her instead, having him frequent the house and see her after his arrival in Rome from England uh, with Ralph Touchett now very sickly. Although Ralph is actually very in love with Isabel, still he entertains the opportunities as a way of bridging the gap between his real desire. It doesn't pan out after Isabel sabotages their efforts much to the dismay of Osmond and to the delight of Pansy of sabotaging this marriage to Lord Warburton, as she preferred non-marriage over being betrothed to anyone other than Edward Rosier. During this period, there are also more advances towards Isabel by Caspar Goodwood, who remains intertwined into her life. The turning point of the story comes when Ralph's illness takes a turn for the worse. Isabel demands that she see him, which Osmond refutes, saying that he was already being tolerant to her when he allowed him to even stay with them at all, and that she's being insolent towards a loving relationship by going. She's directly disrespecting him by leaving Italy. She's directly crossing the Rubicon of their marriage. His power over Isabel temporarily holds her from going until she comes across the Countess Gemini, Osmond's sister, who tells her of the real truth. And this is the big twist, just like in Jane Eyre, with the figure of Rochester's secret. She reveals that Osmond had a previous wife, but that Pansy was not the result of that relationship. Instead, Pansy had been the result of a relationship between Osmond and Madame Merle, which was never consummated because of their lack of money. It was Isabel's money that Ralph had given to her, which led Madame Merle to essentially give up Osmond to give her daughter a better opportunity for wealth. It also reveals the motive of Osmond in attempting to marry his daughter into the British aristocracy with Warburton. After this is revealed to Isabel, she immediately leaves to visit Pansy, who has been put into a convent by her father, where she sees and scorns Madame Merle, who she now sees as an entirely different person to the one that she knew before, the one that played the piano. She then makes the immediate trip to England, to Garncourt, where Ralph is in his final moments. Isabel comes across all the figures of the past, and she realizes how miserable she has become in her relationship. She cries to Ralph in his last moments on his deathbed and thanks him for everything, while Ralph feels tinges of guilt for having placed the burden of such great wealth on her, which caused all the affairs. At the very end of the novel, Isabel comes across Caspar Goodwood again, who, in a rush of motivation and romantic inspiration, uh, with it potentially being the last time he sees her, he confesses his love again and also remonstrates against Osmond's treatment of her, as well as her decision to maintain that lifestyle, which she clearly doesn't enjoy. He tries to extricate her from the lifestyle, which ends up with the two kissing, and is this sort of like injection of romance into the story that was so lacking with the description of Osmond and Isabel. The book, however, instead of sort of Isabel riding away with Caspar Goodwood into the sunset, the book ends with Isabel making leave the next morning, much to the mystery and the surprise of everyone in the house, and starting a new life back in Rome with Osmond again. So she goes back to Osmond, but as we know, since she has crossed the Rubicon, she can never go back to the way things were. But it's all left in misery. A mystery, sorry. Mystery and misery. Henry James never gives us a final, resolution of what happens to Isabel. We can only guess what happens once she goes back to Rome. So, yeah. So that's a summary of The Portrait of a Lady. With my personal opinion, it was a great book. For me, at the start, it picked up a little bit slowly. But that's also because, I thought some of the realism and stuff, wasn't. I quite like a quite fast and hard kind of reading style. But no, it was a great book. Really good detail. I mean, Henry James is very famous for his imperative language. Um, but yeah, no, I would highly recommend it. If you thought the plot sounded good, I highly recommend suggest giving the book a read. But yeah, thank you.